Hello, everyone. Very warm welcome for this webinar on an important topic, which is the enhancing board effectiveness with ISO 30414 Human Capital Disclosure. Myself, Zahid Mubarak, CEO HR Matrix Pakistan, and Aisha Garba, CEO IFA Consulting Nigeria. We welcome you, and we are hoping for an interesting conversation. I have the honor of being a member of the technical committee, which is called ISO TC 260, which has developed, I think by now, more than 30 standards worldwide. ISO 30414, which we are going to discuss today, is one of the prominent standards, and it's one of the most popular standards so far, and developed by the committee. And this standard was published in 2018 in Singapore. In this capacity, we had the honor of working with the different national and the international standard bodies, including the American National Standards Institute, the British standards, the France standards, the German standards, Italy standards, Singapore standards, Indonesia, and a few more in a face-to-face environment. And based on that, this document was developed. I had the honor of being the member of the ESG task force, which was formed by the Pakistan Institute of Corporate Governance and Pakistan Stock Exchange to develop ESG guidelines for Pakistan. I'll describe the profile of the Aisha Garba in more detail. She is an accomplished executive with 2 decades of experience driving transformative growth, digitization, ESG, and operational excellence, spanning diverse sectors, including the financial services, insurance, wealth management, telecom, and education. Our expertise span a wide range of areas, including strategic planning and execution, talent management, data analytics, performance management, organization design. Currently, as the founder and the CEO of IFA Consulting, Aisha is driving the firm mission to deliver executable organization strategies in the workforce development interventions. Prior to this role, she held leadership position at the Veritas Capital Assurance, Main Street Bank, TAC, Asset Management, United Bank of Africa. In these roles, she spearheaded successful initiatives that improved operational efficiency, enhanced customer satisfaction, optimized processes, and increased revenue. Her achievements included turning around the loss-making business organization into the profitable entities, improving human capital reporting to the international standards, ISO 30414, enhancing employee experience that led to higher engagement scores in the customer satisfaction, driving ESG and reducing carbon footprints. She has received the national accolades for her innovative HR strategies. 2021 People First Organization Award and 2022 HR Oscars recognition. Wonderful. Beyond her professional achievements, Aisha is passionate about mentoring aspiring leaders, promoting diversity and inclusion, giving back to the community. She's a sought-after speaker, advisor, and thought leader, inspiring others through her dynamic leadership and relentless pursuit of excellence. Aisha is chartered member, the MCIPD UK, ISO 30414 lead consultant and trainer, ISO 9001 lead auditor, certified employer brand leader, certified OKR professional, licensed human practitioners, chartered insurer, practitioner, chartered quality institute. We have a very rich content to deliver in this presentation that includes the overall background and the justification of the human capital disclosure, how it is evolving, and how you relate it with the expectations of the wider stakeholders, including the shareholders. And we are going to talk about the architecture and the structure of the human capital disclosure, and it would lead us to certain recommendations. The overall objective of this webinar is to basically understand the significance and importance of the human capital disclosure, particularly in the context of the ESG and the stakeholder capitalism for the better decision making. The ultimate goal is to improve the alignment between the human capital in the corporate strategy for the better and the informed decision-making through the evidence-based framework. So the outcome that we expect out of this webinar is to empower the board members and the executive to make better and the informed decision-making, the alignment of the HR with the organization strategy, and improve the overall disclosure, transparency, and the objectivity in the workforce management. Now, traditionally, if you see the overall significance of the HR, which basically falls into the spectrum of the intangibles, you would realize and acknowledge that the kind of significance that is given to the traditional tangible assets that does not exist for the human capital or the human resources. And this has been found on the basis of a global survey, in which more than 51% of the investors they declared that the information that is generated by the human resources is hard to understand in a way that, for example, you can determine whether there's an improvement or no improvement in the employee engagement or the investment in the human capital or the quality of hire, but how does it relate to the organization outcomes? So going beyond the activities and focusing on the outcome, that's the key area. And that puzzle is being solved by the ISO 30414. And this currently, the state of significance on the importance which is given to the human capital is I would say, obvious because of the fact there's a huge investment going into the intangibles overall, and HR is the main component of the intangibles. If you see this graph and look at the data around 50 years ago, the overall valuation of the intangibles in the organization context of the 500 Fortune companies was around 17%, which was less than 20%. But now you see it has exceeded, it is exceeding 90%. So the investors, the shareholders, they cannot afford to ignore the human capital, particularly from the impact and the ROI perspective. And there are already plenty of tools, plenty of standards worldwide, which emphasize the different aspects, like the Sustainable Development Goals, investor shareholder services, the most recent European Sustainability Reporting Standards and Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the Global Reporting Initiative, the ISO, International Financial Reporting Standards, and the Human Capital Management Coalition, which is not a standard, but the body. But if you look at the different frameworks, most of the frameworks talk about the human capital in a more descriptive and more subjective way, which you can call the qualitative. So in a qualitative information, there are always interpretations. The personal biases are there. But how you can make a better combination of the quantitative and the qualitative information, that's one of the key considerations. And secondly, if you analyze the different frameworks on the basis of the 11 key components in the human capital, that include the organization health and safety, diversity, training, well-being, reward system, recruitment, turnover, human rights, cost, labor relation, productivity, ISO 30414 is found to be one of the most comprehensive frameworks which provides objectivity and clear information that can help in making a better decision. So once the standard was developed in 2018, we were able to roll it out in Singapore. Since then, by now, at least 20 companies have got certified on the standards worldwide. They are in the different parts of the world. Likewise, the professionals, they are gaining personal qualifications around the standards. And by now, more than 800 people have got certified on the standard. So this basically showed the increasing importance of this standard. And over here, I'll just stop over. And I would like to request Aisha Galba to take over. And I think she's also designed a few questions to understand your perception about the ISO 30414. So Aisha, I stop and over to you. Thank you so much. I'll be able to assist you in walking through the polls, and feel free to, present your part of the presentation. Thank you so much.
Aisha, you're on mute.
Aisha, please unmute yourself.
Hi, sorry. I didn't realize we do that quite often. I mean, it became the most popular phrase during COVID. You're on mute, you're on mute. So COVID is over, but yeah, we're still kind of hanging on to that. So yes, thank you very much, Zahid, for that introduction. We'll just dive straight in. And the best way for us to really come to terms with, the subject, which is about human capital disclosure, and then starting, of course, with human capital reporting, and then really the activities around human capital. I would like us to just quickly put up a poll. Sadia, if we have it ready, that'll be good so that we can just get them to quickly just respond to the poll while I get my slides up.
Yeah, just a moment.
Okay, thank you.
Can you see that on your screen?
Yeah, we can see.
Zahid, if you can also enable me to share.
So yeah, Aisha would like to moderate and may like to explain the questions so that people can attempt. Can you see it on the screen, Aisha?
Yes, I can. So how familiar are you with ISO 30414? So those are the options that we have: very familiar, somewhat familiar, not familiar. That way we have a sense of how popular this framework is, and we'll know how to get more discussions, support around it, and to be able to push it further because it's becoming a very popular framework. So please just go ahead and respond to the poll, and then we'll be able to move forward with the presentation. So there you go. How familiar are you with ISO 30414? Very familiar, somewhat familiar, not familiar.
Okay, I think by now 9 people have attempted. I request everyone to please attempt this poll. This will give us a little more understanding about the current state of affairs.
Yeah.
Okay. Last 10 seconds. Okay, I'm ending this first question, and you can see the results on the screen.
Very interesting, Zahid. Somewhat familiar in between. At least is not totally unfamiliar. So it looks like at least people are familiar with the framework, and maybe, of course, ISO as a body. I'm sure everybody would be, quite familiar with the International Standards Organization. So this topic, rests on ISO 30414, which is one of the very unique frameworks designed by the International Standard Organization, specifically on human capital reporting, which is a subset of human capital disclosure. So we'll be diving straight into the rest of the presentation so that for those of us that are quite familiar with it, it's just for us to get a better understanding of the trends that are going on. And then for us that are somewhat, familiar, to get a better insight. And then those of us that are not yet familiar, I assure you by the end of this session, you will be familiar with it. So we can proceed.
Okay.
So now if you enable the sharing of the screen, then I can proceed with the presentation.
Go to the
Okay.
next poll. There's another question. Which aspect of ESG do you think it's impacted by the human capital disclosure? Please give your input. Okay. Nice. Okay, anybody else would like to attempt? Nice. Okay, good. 11 people. Okay. Okay, I'm ending the poll and you can see the results.
Another interesting feedback, Zahid, we have 58% getting that response on social.
Mhm.
That is it really.
Yeah.
Because it's about the human rights, the economic growth. So it's largely about, social welfare, social well-being, everything that has to do with people.
Mhm.
And that's why, of course, investors, even all stakeholders are interested to see, just like you said about the human capital, how such an intangible asset, is one that drives a lot of value, creates a lot of value. I mean, without the human capital in organizations, then, all these great ideas, innovations, will not be seeing them coming through. So we really need to appreciate the level of, human capital, intellectual capital, and the value creation that comes with it. Thank
Nice.
you.
Okay, so the next question is about the importance, particularly the benefits of the ISO 30414. And please share your perception. Okay, more people. Right, I'm ending the poll, sharing the result. Okay, interesting.
100%,
Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
then now the last one.
That's spot on.
Yeah.
Just one more poll. It's just to get us thinking, to make this interactive, and then be able to at least be very familiar with the topic, have some key takeaways from it as well.
I think there's some issue technically.
fourth-
I suggest you to proceed to the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zahid. So I can go ahead and share the screen now. Fantastic. Okay. So this is where we were with the poll, but I'll just proceed now. And with the very rich insight and intro that we got from Zahid, this is just to put everything into context. We might have seen some of this flyers going around. It's just really to change the narrative from underreporting of human capital and the undervaluation of human capital being the main agenda of discussion in boardrooms. And really, because the board doesn't have a lot of information, rich information, standardized metrics that informs the kind of reporting that is being presented, you find that a lot of discussions, a lot of initiatives are stepped down because they're not backed up by numbers. And if you have a board or investors, board members that are very, very particular about, seeing where the money is, following the money, seeing the value in it, without the numbers supporting what the human capital initiative and all the activities that are going on in the organization and how they relate with the other forms of capital in the organization, really, they will not be interested to get, you won't be able to get their buy-in in a lot of the human capital initiatives. And we want to change that narrative. And the best way to do that is to make sure you have numbers to support your initiatives. You have numbers to be able to convince your board on certain deliverables, certain initiatives that human capital can deliver. Because without human capital, organizations really will not be able to have all those good brands, good products, good ideas that, we have all around the world. So without further ado, I'll just go into now put some context around human capital that we've been discussing.
So Aisha, can you keep your presentation in the slideshow mode?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Is that clear now?
Yeah, it's good.
So yes, this is just to put into context about human capital, how reporting of human capital and the disclosure of human capital rests on human capital activities and the initiatives that, go on within organizations. So yes, human capital encompasses the knowledge, the skills, the behavior, the KSB as we know it, that, employees bring into an organization and what they do with them to churn it out into results, into, impact, into outcome. Now, it's intangible, as we've seen, and we've seen that organizations are really appreciating the value that is coming with it and are now keen to see how they can value it even more in terms of metrics, in terms of numbers, and to see the impact overall. So what the input is, what goes on, what the output and the outcome is at the end of the day for the organization. So of course, if you have a good structure, a standardized system, a standardized framework, your human capital reporting and your human capital disclosure will definitely give insightful, actionable points and be able to assist in some of the strategic decision-making that needs to be carried out at the highest level of governance. And that is why we are calling on the attention of, the boards, the C-suite, the executives, people manning human capital to take this call very seriously so that they can be able to present, reports that will be able to make those decisions happen, and not that they're pushed out or, stepped down and, just not given the due attention and due value that they deserve. So here I'm just sort of showing the distinctiveness between what human capital reporting is and human capital disclosure. For HCR, which is human capital reporting, that's just basically the various metrics that you come up with. They can be just the normal metrics that we're familiar with, not necessarily from the ISO 30414, which has its own set of metrics specific to it. It's broader. And then when you compare it to the HCD, it's specific, it's more mandatory. As we go along the webinar, I will share with you some of the insights on, human capital disclosure, the trends and what organizations are doing and their level of requirements or compliance as it relates to them. In terms of the kind of audience HCR requires, it requires internal and external stakeholders. Meanwhile, HCD is mainly for the investors, for the regulators. So investors want to see that, look, as I'm going through your financials, I'm going through your books or, learning about your organization, there's certain disclosures, material information that, will help me take an informed decision. For regulators, they want to see compliance. They want to see comparability across other organizations. In terms of requirement for HCR, it's voluntary. For HCD, it's more mandatory, really. And that's what we've seen a lot of Securities and Exchange Commissions of various countries, coming together to push for, and other bodies, standard setters, global policy, formulators. We'll see that very shortly. And in terms of its purpose for HCR, it's more, instant strategic decision-making. And for HCD, it's just meeting the regulatory requirements. But you see, without HCR, your HCD will not be very complete. And that's where we will now want to show its relevance, HCR and HCD to the different key stakeholders. So for the board, which is the highest level of governance, the highest level of leadership, the highest level of decision-making, when you have good reports, it enables the board to, address critical human capital issues more openly. So the elephant in the room that tends to be ignored will be addressed more openly, more candidly, because they have insightful information that, they can understand or relate with. So these are things that border on diversity, that border on pay, that border on, leadership, on culture. So those are things that are not often discussed in the boardroom because it's like, oh, it's to do with leadership, it's to do with culture, let management handle that. No, we want the board to be interested in it so that they push and advocate for more internal transparency in terms of what's going on with human capital. So the board should be interested in such reports and not just feel, oh, management should handle it. No, the board should be interested in that. And other areas too is, of course, for, EBITDA. We also want to see that, the board is interested in how the human capital relates with other capitals of value creation for financial capital, the intellectual capital, those things that we already mentioned. For the board, it promotes accountability and transparency. So they are able to have, to fulfill their fiduciary responsibility. because it's upon them. So as the main and highest office, they need to have that rich report. For the investor, he needs to know what are those things that are going on in the organization that pose as risks, that, I would not want to put my money there. I wouldn't want to be associated with a company that has a bad reputation, that has a really high level of attrition, has poor culture, has poor diversity or leadership parameters. I wouldn't want to put my money in there. So I want to see that, organizations that I'm relating with or being able to take my investment decision, they promote the S in ESG, the social aspect of it, the human side of it, so they want to see that organizations are ethical and have sustainable practices. For the C-suite, of course, they are also the main drivers, right? After the board, they need the HCR so that they have more insightful reports that, helps them to align talent management with the corporate objectives or the business goals. And to be able to see that when they relate with investors, they relate with even customers at the highest level, the big tickets that you're chasing after, that you're able to articulate, the workforce contribution to the overall impact that they're making to the numbers or, the long-term value that they're creating. And at the end of the day, when the HCR is coming out well, it is easier to make sure that the human capital disclosure, is fulfilled and you're complying so that you avoid legal and financial risks. Okay, so, yes. So to put everything into context, we have an ecosystem here, and that normally plays out in most organizations that are, forward thinking in terms of their reporting, in terms of their disclosure. This is sort of the typical scenario that plays out. It may vary, of course, for different organizations, for different sectors, what they're prioritizing. For the board, when they look at, the kind of organization that they're, overseeing, the report that they get, and that is why we're emphasizing that the report that they get is very, very important. It really gives them an idea of the value, the true cost of human capital, and what value creation is happening in that organization. So what are the risks? So in terms of transparency, it supports that. Okay, so when we look at the graph here or the chart, it just shows us that, at the highest level where we have the organization, that's where the human capital rests. That's where all the, ideas are being churned out, the talent, that are bringing in all the value to the organization, their experiences, their skills, and transforming, potential into success. So we can see that, with the reporting of data, it helps the board to take informed decisions. Likewise, when the board takes their decision, of course, they share that with the C-suite. And then that's where, of course, things to do with talent management, workforce planning, decisions that largely impact on the workforce, is percolating down. And that's where we look at what selection and retention will be for workforce planning. And that's where we need to put that value on employees to see what are those ideas or what are those unique talents that we need to bring into the organization because of the peculiarity of our field or our industry. Who are those that we need to get out there? And then in terms of retention, how do we keep them and sustain and ensure that, they don't walk out on us or they don't leave us? That too affects customers and clients and largely investors. So they want to see that there's ethical practices going on. Workforce practices are also quite transparent, quite supported and ethical. Regulators want to see compliance. That's just they want to see, and it's about investor protection. It's also ensuring that investors have confidence in these organizations. And of course, largely the communities. So yes, the main three key stakeholders that are, we just discussed. There are other stakeholders in the whole ecosystem. So we have even by and large communities benefiting from this positive social impact. Okay, so that's just a quick overview of what a typical reporting and disclosure ecosystem looks like. The rise of ESG investing in human capital disclosure. This is where the discussion, sits Okay, this is where we were getting to get you to see the full picture of the impact of ESG and the impact of HCD, human capital disclosure. Okay, so investors want to see that just beyond the numbers that they see, the humans that are churning out those numbers, how are you treating them? How are they doing? They're interested. They want to know. I mean, there's no financial statement that, in whether small or big organizations don't have some form of sustainability reporting. They must disclose the kind of workforce numbers they have, the opening strength, the closing strength. So we're seeing regulators around the world pushing for more disclosures. Okay, and that is why this discussion is happening, so that it's not at the last minute that we're coming to terms with this, but no, let us be ready because it's happening the world over. And we're seeing that different regions around the world are catching up. And we just want to push for more of these discussions so that when HR practitioners, professionals, leaders, the board, all the stakeholders have one voice around this and are able to support it and see that it's not a big deal, it's not a difficult discussion, it's not a difficult thing to relate with. It's something that we should be proud of when we scale it down to our individual organizations or our individual departments, that human capital should be valued. And when we're reporting and disclosing them, we should have good framework that is standardized, that is structured, that can, be able to help us, in making those articulate reports and disclosures. So there is a growing number of demand for, human capital disclosure to be more standardized. And in that standardization, the investors, the stakeholders, the regulators want to see that it is a common framework, a global framework that they can relate with, because we have organizations or subsidiaries in other regions. So we don't want to have a particular kind of metrics that is just made for a certain region or a certain country. No, we want global metrics that, transcends beyond, just a particular region, but is global, is accepted, it is welcomed. So that is where ISO 30414 comes in. The global trend, this is just an overview that gives us an idea of how the ESG reporting is. There's, of course, that increased global demand, that recognition, and we're seeing that in developed markets where, they are really pushing for mandatory. It's not just voluntary, but mandatory ESG reporting with a strong focus on human capital. We're seeing that in the US, in the EU. Emerging markets, yes, for now it's voluntary, but we are seeing a growing number of organizations, of Security and Exchange Commissions and organizations and other global standard setters push for more of those mandatory disclosures, mandatory reporting within, the context of sustainability. In terms of how the HCD serves as a key for the ESG component is, again, boiling down to the numbers. How do you generate the reports? How does human capital reporting, which is, the bigger aspect of human capital disclosure, that you're able to relate with it and extract, those details and material information that you can use in showcasing your organization as being compliant in terms of disclosing certain aspects of human capital. Okay, so the trend is quite popular, as I mentioned, and we will continue to see that rise, like in regions in Japan and Australia, while promoting voluntary, but they are catching up to see. And the drivers for the ESG and HCD is largely investors. They come in and they want to invest in organizations that they feel confident, comfortable investing and not having any regrets or have that concern that there are a lot of risks involved in the organization that they do not want to associate with them. So that would really be bad optics for the organization. So it's really important that we continue to see and support these developments that these organizations, the world organizations or world bodies that are pushing for it, we welcome it, so that when you're familiar with this discussion that we're having and, things that come up on ESG or human capital disclosure, you are well-versed, at least conversant, to giving your own input on it. So that is what we want to see, that there's more of such support around that area. This table just shows us, the organizations that are highly influential in supporting ESG and promoting the human capital disclosure across their countries or their regions. So we have IOSCO here, which is the international body that is responsible for, securities commissions all around the world. There are over 200 members in 130 jurisdictions. Their focus, of course, is on investor protection, market integrity, and that includes ESG and HCD. Yes, you can see the star marked around it because they are unique in what they do as IOSCO, the International Organization of Securities Commissions. We'll see in the subsequent slides the kind of trends and the kind of impact they're making and why we should key into them and why we should understand and support the need for our securities commissions in our own countries go ahead to, make sure that we are able to relate with this ESG reporting, human capital disclosure drive, and within our own sphere of influence within our organizations, we're compliant. Okay, so it makes it easier, in the implementation. ISO is the International Organization for Standardization. That's the, again, second organization. I've put a star there because it's global. And that's where we have the first and unique framework that has been developed specifically for human capital reporting and serves as a tool for human capital disclosure. Then we have the other organizations, the ISSB, the GRI, of course, the SDG, which we've seen the link between SDG and ESG. Barenberg and other researchers, have pushed to see the lens of ESG through SDGs. So again, it's about sustainability practices. Then we have seen WEF. For every time that the WEF, we see the push for more global economic policies, social policies centered around, human capital, centered around people, centered around climate, centered around sustainability. We have the Human Capital Management Coalition as well, and then the IFRS, which used to be the VAF, and following some mergers that they've done with other organizations, SASB, so they're now IFRS Reporting Standards Foundation. So it just shows the evolution that is going on there and why there's need for more mergers, there's need for more like-minded approach to seeing that, this drive for sustainability is here to stay. The CSRD in the EU has made it mandatory now, so the member states, must comply. So there's a high regulatory framework that has been developed for that level of compliance. This is just related to the earlier slides that Zahid also shared on the international frameworks. So the other two that I added are those that have the stars there, so that we see that, look, these are not just the only organizations, by the way. We have other organizations, several organizations, that are pushing. But we just wanted to pick the ones that are a bit more global, that we are a bit more familiar with, and just to give you sort of a snippet into what's going on and, the focus, the common focus, the common theme that they have about ESG and HCD. ESG and HCD, as you can see, all of them are really supporting for that level of standardization and their presence in the different regions of the world. So they're growing bigger. This is just a representation of some countries in different parts of the continents of the world that are part of the IOSCO. They are members of the IOSCO. And this is just sort of to display the level of membership, the level of compliance based on the Securities and Exchange Commissions for these countries. So here, if you can see, is showing us for the different countries, for example, in Asia, like the top 20 economies here, Kuwait, Qatar, Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi, South Korea, Japan. We're seeing quite a number of these organizations that are members of IOSCO pushing within their own national jurisdiction for that level of compliance. For example, now in Pakistan, I understand that the disclosures have been published. The voluntary is just a voluntary warranty for the disclosure, but it shows that things are happening. That it's not just the US that has been pushing for this largely, or the EU, but other parts of the world in different continents this discussion, this implementation, this practice, and now this discussion is going on widely and largely. So we need to support it, get a better understanding of it on how our own countries are keying into it and then breaking it down or scaling it further down to our own companies. What are we doing to see that, we are part of this movement? We cannot take for granted the human capital, the intellectual capital. They are the value creators that are making our organizations successful or otherwise. Okay, so if you can see here, it's just showing us, for example, now around Asia. Here we have Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, Zambia, South Africa. In Europe, we have, of course, the UK, which is not a member of the EU, but they are also making it mandatory. And all the member states in the EU are making it mandatory. So it's just to show us, again, just a snippet, an insight into what is going on in different parts of the world and why we should take this human capital disclosure and ESG reporting very seriously. Again, just to show us the level of ISPO membership, and it's growing, it's really growing. So here it just represents that 43%. Of course, US is the largest, they are the most influential SEC, in the world, and they have been doing a lot in that space. And that is why we're seeing the trend, go on to other regions. Africa is catching up in terms of the membership. They have regional memberships as well, not just with ISCO, some of which are members of ISCO, by the way. South America, that's the level of membership. Europe, Asia, and Australia, so basically we're trying to see that no region is left out. And if they're not yet members, they will be members. So just to show you the kind of influence, for example, ISCO has on this kind of discussion, which it's largely about the investor protection, is about human capital, disclosure, seeing that, people have good workplace practices. Based on this ESG and HCD maturity levels across the regions, US mandates extensive ESG disclosures with, human capital, Canada, Mexico. So these are like the top 3 economies within these continents: Europe, Germany, UK, and France. So you can see that it's mandatory or is required. Asia, we have China, Japan, India. We see voluntary reporting in China, but with increased focus on ESG disclosures. Japan, promoting the disclosures of human capital. So by and large, we can see that across various continents, or all the continents, that, this level of implementation, compliance, and ongoing trend to push from voluntary to mandatory is taking place. So this is just sort of a quick overview of what is going on in terms of the maturity levels. We've already taken a poll, so I'll just skip this so that we have time for our Q&A. We're almost wrapping up. The bridge, that is ISO 30414. That is the bridge between human capital disclosure and ESG. Okay, and how does it support? How does ISO 30414 support human capital disclosure? Standardization. The fact that, it's ISO that developed this, it already lends itself credibility. It stands on good authority. We've seen successful ISO from 9001 to what we have now on 30414, numerous standards that the ISO has developed. So we've seen a good number of recognition, some level of endorsement of the ISO 30414 to continue to be part of, HCR and HCD. It has its own key metrics. So yes, there are other metrics that, we see generally that we relate with in human capital in our HR departments. We see them in our reports. But what we're saying is that take it a notch up, and use more of the ISO 30414 metrics. It's not too different from what you already are using, but the fact that it's a bit more standardized and gives more room for comparability, definitely, it stands out. That's the unique aspect of the ISO 30414. It builds stakeholder trust, and then ensures transparency of how human capital management is going on in different organizations. Investing responsibly is what any investor is interested in doing. They want to be sure that where I'm putting my money, I'm going to get value, and it's ethical. They have a moral compass. They care about people. You know, they're not just taking people for granted, or, you know, they have some risks or certain human capital issues or reputation that they definitely would not want to associate themselves with. Okay, so that's where, you know, this sort of framework serves the purpose to give you that key insight on what's going on within your respective organizations and how you can ensure you give a better reporting of it and subsequently a disclosure at the end of the day, because you need to do an effective HCR before you're able to extract the material information that you need to put up as your HCD. Why ISO 30414? I just mentioned it, really. This is just to show us the metrics, the 11 metrics, or rather the human capital areas and the different metrics that they have. So there's 11 human capital areas, and for each of these areas, there are different sub metrics that come with them that are associated with each of these human capital areas. So we have compliance and ethics, costs, diversity, organizational culture, leadership, organization health, safety, well-being, productivity, skills and capabilities, recruitment. Recruitment has 14 metrics, very interesting, because really that is one of the areas where it supports disclosure, you know, at the end of the day when you do a good reporting, because it shows you your turnover rate, it shows you the attrition, the internal mobility, and, you know, level of retention, you know, that you're able to do. Then succession planning is very key, of course, for organizations. They need to see that, you know, they have a good succession plan in place to be able to keep the talents and have people ready, you know, to fulfill those positions. Then we have workforce availability as the 11th human capital area that also has its own metrics. So as I mentioned, the ISO 30414 is about standardization. It has that recognition, that credibility, and it's compatible with other frameworks. That's the good thing about it. So it integrates very well with, you know, some of the metrics. I mean, some of the human capital frameworks that we've seen, like GRI, SDG, it has a good handshake with these frameworks. So if you're already using some of these frameworks, and an add-on of ISO 30414 makes it a bit more seamless. It makes it more easy to relate with. So if you have ISO 30414 well integrated in your organization, this is what your HCD will look like, your HCD, HCR ecosystem. This is what it will look like. Your human capital reporting and human capital disclosure ecosystem will look like this, because there are key benefits around them, which is about standardization, enhanced transparency, you know, alignment of corporate strategy with, you know, people strategy, data-driven insights and analysis, and of course, the fact that it supports ESG and other frameworks. That is quite a good number of benefits that you get. That's not limited to these 5. There are other benefits, but these are the key or primary benefits that, you know, you will get from ISO 30414. So if your metrics are standardized and they're consistent, it makes it easy to compare. If you have an enhanced level of transparency and clarity with the ISO 304, your reports are more comprehensive. It builds trust within your reporting to your board, and the board will now have a better understanding of what you're reporting to them. And when you want to do your disclosures or prepare for your reports or filing within your own SEC, you know what you're saying, you know what you're doing. And then, of course, it synchronizes corporate objectives. When you're looking at your human capital, you're now trying to see the alignment. We'll see an example shortly. Then in terms of data-driven insights and analysis, it helps, you know, to identify, you know, risks and opportunities and areas of improvement. You know, instant interventions can be put in place, not a latent or reactive approach to it. And for ESG compliance, ISO 30414 really lends itself very well in that area to support, because it has been designed specifically to promote more of that reporting and disclosure at the end of the day. Further down, when we look at it, how it sort of percolates to different stakeholders, the HCR enables understanding of true cost and the value that human capital impacts on the organization. The board has a better understanding of that because the report is now clear. It is the ISO 30414, and then if it's the investor, for the investor, is about the disclosure. They want to see transparency and be able to compare and make good informed decisions on their investments. For the C-suite and the executives, yes, your CHRO, your CFO, your chief sustainability officer, the C-suite, the exco, the leaders or leadership, they are able to take informed decisions because it is clear, to them how certain human capital metrics, are impacting on different parts of the organization and on activities within the organization. For employees, it shows them that, yes, you care. There's transparency in what is going on, and it's not hidden, it's not shrouded in some form of mystery. For customers, they see that, yes, you have that moral compass. Yes, there's ethics in what you do. So it gives them confidence. Some of your customers might actually be investors as well. So they're also good key stakeholders to pay attention to. Of course, our regulators, they're here to ensure that we're compliant and we're doing the right thing at all times, and we don't want to run foul of the regulations and get any penalty. No organization wants to get that heavy gavel from regulators. We want to be very compliant to avoid fines and penalties, because guess what? We still have to disclose it in our financial reports. So let's avoid that and make sure we're compliant. And if we have metrics or framework like this that makes it easy for us for reporting and for disclosure, then, we will certainly avoid, things that will make us run afoul of regulations and guidelines. For communities, at the end of the day, that's where the SDG, the ESG comes in largely, to see that, yes, for social economic drive, for growth, for job security, that within our communities, we're seen as as the company of choice, that invests in people, and it's good branding, is good employer branding, is good, is a good way of supporting and making sure that your organizations are appreciated by your community. So other employee value propositions or CSRs that you need to do also fall in that area, because they relate with that company at that level and appreciate, the social impact that you're making within those communities. Let's have an example from the metrics from the ISO 30414 on EBITDA. EBITDA is common for every organization that, is particular about how it impacts on the organization. So let's say you have a new hire that you're considering to get on board, and this person is going to bring in key accounts and, already has existing relationships. And if you look at your current state of EBITDA per employee, you have 200,000, and then the number of employees is 100. The revenue right now is 100 million. The expenses 80 million. This is just hypothetical. So we're just making assumptions just to give you an idea of how, ISO 30414 metrics can add value to EBITDA. Of course, if you want to get the current EBITDA, it will just be the 100 minus 80, and that gives you 20. So for the metric here, we're going to look at the revenue minus expenses over the total number of employees. And when we want to consider what impact this is going to make at the end of the day, this new hire that will cost us 5 million already has existing accounts, and we want him or her to be able to bring on board these new transactions so that we are able to expand to other regions. It will strengthen our customer base, and it is crucial for long-term sustainability and growth. What is the implication of this 5 million? The implication, an additional hire bringing your headcount to 101. The increase in revenue, 50 million. Let's say that's the target you've set for this new hire that is expected to generate that, annually. What would be the postal investment after this? If you look at the new total revenue, it will be 115, because if that new sales guy or lady is able to bring in at least 50 million of her target or his target, that's a plus. The expenses, yes, you will have an additional 5 million in it. So that makes it 85 million due to the cost of hiring this salesperson. But when you look at the overall revenue and the EBITDA and what expenses you have, your EBITDA now will be 115 minus 85 to give you 30. So the EBITDA per employee, when you want to look at it, just to have a spread, is always good. Yeah, there's been debates around whether EBITDA is even a good metric in the first place for financials or even bringing it into human capital. But for me, I strongly believe it's a good metric to have. It's still a good measure because it just gives you an idea if you want to break it down per employee. It just is still good. Some argue that, yeah, well, it's not fair because not everyone has the same kind of target or responsibility, but it's just sort of an aggregate. It just gives you an idea of what's going on, within the organization in terms of EBITDA. And if we look at the implication here, based on this example, we can see that the increase in EBITDA is 30 million. So therefore, per employee, when you look at it from the 200,000 that we had earlier from the current state, it has increased by 97,000. So that shows some level of improvement and the impact on productivity. That's not to say that there's even some other hidden savings that has come with this. So this new hire is so good that, has improved operational efficiencies, because of how well and how vast they are in their field. Definitely, there will be some hidden costs savings that will come, with this new hire's role in the organization, because they are well experienced and there's certain things that, they would do it and it will not have to cost so much for the organization if they were to not hire the new hire. So in conclusion, what are the future trends in HCD and ESG? We will definitely see an increase, a more growing demand for integration of ESG practices, in corporate strategies. We'll definitely see that the ISO 30414 will become the cornerstone for organizations that, are forward-thinking in enhancing the transparency and building, more confidence and trust among stakeholders. We'll also see that human capital will be seamlessly aligned with corporate strategy, which will increase level of compliance and transparency for the workforce practices. And it will be easier for these regulatory bodies to compare. There's a growing field of technology that is pushing for more advanced people analytics, AI, and that will be leveraged definitely to help, gain those insights. And there'll be increased stringent disclosure requirements across regions, as we've seen earlier. It's catching on. And then the emphasis on ESG as well will continue to grow. And that will necessitate the alignment of organizational practices. For recommendations, I would suggest that, you start conducting a thorough assessment of your existing human capital reporting practices. Look at what you have on ground and see how you can improve or enhance, step by step. It's not everything that we require out of the ISO 30414, but look at the metrics that really matter to your organization and also those ones that are likely to be of interest for the regulators or the investor. You need to also make sure that there's a routine review that goes on in terms of the human capital metrics to ensure compliance and relevance, of course, and how it fits into the broader sustainability picture. Call to action for the board: lead your organization in adopting this ISO 30414.
It's 15 hours.
Then for executives, you need to align it with your workforce strategy, with the business goals, and drive to see that there's more synergy in terms of the financial performance, people performance, and of course, sustainable growth. I will now say thank you for your time, your audience, and hand over to Zahid. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Aisha, for walking us through with a very comprehensive detail. And if I summarize what you have said, I tend to hear these statements, and I'm assuming that you also would have had the similar experience that people are most valuable asset in the organizations. I call it the sentiments, the narrative, the judgments. How do you translate these sentiments into the measurable actions and how you can demonstrate the outcomes of those actions? I think that is where the ISO 30414 comes. And now the important aspect is that whether we really buy this concept, this is, I think, the first and the foremost thing, which we have to ask ourselves. And the other thing is that if we really buy this concept, we need to internalize and determine where do we stand, where do we want to go. I think that would be the more, I think, pertinent and the actionable aspect of this entire process. Okay, so we stop over here for some time and we have the opportunity for questions or the comments by the attendees. So feel free to have your voice verbally. You may like to have your video on, or it could be in the voice mode, or even in the chat mode. So we would like to have your views on this. Any questions, comments, please feel free to share your thoughts. Anyone who want to have any perspective? Okay. Assuming that you are comfortable with what has been described. All right. So if there's no question or the comment, I think we would be able to follow up with your, okay. So I think somebody with the name of Oscar wants to have any viewpoint. Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much for the presentation. I have just one question. I'll follow through from the beginning to the ending. So how do you get certified to this standard as a professional? What are the things you need to do to get certified to this standard?
Aisha, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you for your question, Oscar. That it shows that's a deep stick test for us that it has made you interested in ISO 30414, which is good. And clearly something that you want to see that you improve on in your organization. So for the training and the certification, IFA Consulting provides that in partnership with HR Metrics. So we do the certifications, we do the workshops, we do trainings as well. And we'll be able to support you, in that area. So if it's something that you want to proceed with, you can certainly take up the discussion after this session, and then, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Happy to support. By the way, it's as a custom, we also send a follow-up email. And in that email, we tend to ask, is there a, appetite for the next step? And so feel free to respond, or even before that, get in touch with us and we'll be happy to support you in the next steps. Okay, anyone else? Any thoughts, opinions? I think something in the chat box, but okay. No, thank you, has been mentioned. Okay, anyone else? All right, if there's nothing, we say goodbye and happy to stay in contact. We'll follow up. My team is going to send you the detail, and feel free to get in touch.